honored to be joined by legendary sports broadcaster, longtime NBC Sunday Night Football play-by-play voice, and a fellow Arizona State Sun Devil, the venerable Al Michaels. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. And I see you have Marc-Andre Fleury behind you there. So
And
just remember
the
two-time Stanley Cup champions, the Los Angeles Kings.
Duly noted.
In case you're wondering.
We are here to talk about the NFL schedule, which was released Thursday, but you being a broadcaster, do you get early access to it?
Not that much earlier. I think I saw the schedule about 2 hours before it was officially announced. I'd gotten some a little birdie whispered in my ear that we were going to get Vegas at least once, and I was very happy to see the Raiders on twice. And I mean, you talk about great games. You got Brady coming to town with Tampa Bay, and then Mahomes coming to town a month later with Kansas City. So those are two games that I looked at on the schedule and I said, yeah, that's going to be terrific.
Why do you think the NFL did that? To just tease John Gruden with those two amazing quarterbacks?
Well, you have to play them anyway because the schedule is the schedule. In other words, no matter where you put Tampa Bay and Kansas City, they were going to play in Las Vegas. So, they were going to come one way or another. They were going to come and play on a Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock or maybe on a Thursday night. But we're thrilled to have those games on Sunday night. I mean, the one thing that Gruden knows better than anybody else is what you see is what you're going to get. And when that season ends the prior year, you know what your 16 games are and you know what your 8 home games are. And we're sure happy that 2 of them are on Sunday night.
And there are 4 primetime spots for the Raiders this season, a franchise record, 2 of them, as you mentioned, on Sunday Night Football. Obviously, the league wants to show off this new asset, the Allegiant Stadium. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, there are a lot of things in play here. You got a brand new stadium. You've got Las Vegas. I mean, that's, you didn't move the team to Billings, Montana, or Grand Forks, North Dakota. I mean, it is Las Vegas. And Las Vegas, just, the name of the city sings, and people like to see things from Las Vegas or in Las Vegas. So, and then you got the Raiders who, are on the rebound right now. An attractive team. They've always been a team that has had a great following. And even when they were not very good for a lot of those years in Oakland, if we'd put them on Sunday night, the ratings were really good. So you've got the new stadium, you got the city of Las Vegas itself, and you got a team that draws. So we're looking at it like it's a trifecta.
Yeah, I think the last time they were on Sunday Night Football was 2017.
It was. Yeah, they just weren't very good. And there were a lot of times we were trying to, get them. But every time you put the Raiders on, it means you're not putting some other team on. So we couldn't slide it in. But I do know this. In all the years that I've done primetime football, some of the most memorable games that I have done involve the Raiders going all the way back. Hopefully that'll be the case again in 2020.
Well, give me one of those memories then while you mention it.
Well, one of the memories, I think number one would actually, they were the opponent. And it was the night that Brett Favre came in to Oakland many years ago, 2001 or 2 or 3 maybe. And I was doing the game with John Madden, and Brett's father had died the day before. And the question was, would he play? And he did. And of course, whatever pass he threw the night was pulled in by magic. And he threw 4 touchdown passes, and he kind of collapsed at the end of the game. And it's almost as if the team rallied around him to the extent that he couldn't lose. And I mean, even the Raiders had to be, they had to feel for him, and the crowd knew all about it too. But it was, under the circumstances, one of the most amazing games I have ever seen, and a game that, if you go back over the history of Brett Favre's career, that could be number one.
It's unique you say that even the fans there were somewhat, hard to call the black hole kind, or.
No, but they under those circumstances, they knew. And for him to come out under those circumstances, and everybody knew about it beforehand, you had to root for the guy.
You think that the black hole is done for? Can it translate to Las Vegas, or will it be too corporate here to allow for that?
Well, it depends. I think, you'll probably get a few of those wackos coming down there, obviously. They're getting on planes from the Bay Area, heading on down. So, yeah, you'll have. I can't imagine a Raider game being played without, everybody in costume and all of that. And listen, in Las Vegas, anything goes anyway. So I would expect it to be a pretty exciting scene, and pretty much like the Dog Pound is in Cleveland, where they moved to a new stadium, but the same people wound up going to that new stadium and forming the Dog Pound. So I see that happening again in Vegas. I mean, it has become corporate, but no matter where you go, you get enough of the crazies, and it's always great to have the crazies in the ballpark.
I agree. Al, you're going to be responsible for introducing the American public to the new stadium. I imagine you've been part of broadcasts like that in the past of debuting stadiums.
A lot, in fact. It seems to be a tradition for prime time. We in my Monday night years, we opened up Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. We opened up the Link in Philadelphia. In the Sunday night years, we opened up the stadium in Dallas. So when there's a new facility, and this year too, we're going to open up the stadium in Los Angeles on the opening Sunday game when Dallas comes in to play the Rams. So I think what the league likes to do is they like to showcase the new facilities, and there's no better way to showcase them than to put them on Sunday Night Football. So and twice this year, so we'll have a lot of fun with that. And it's I haven't been in the stadium, but have flown in a couple of times. It looks like it's going to be terrific.
Do you imagine you'll get a tour prior?
I'm sure I will. I better, because otherwise I'm not going to talk about it. No, listen, let's just hope we get some fans in there when we do come in there, that I'm not getting a tour around an empty stadium. At least we can hopefully get at least partially filled and see what happens. We're all hoping for the best, but at this point, Amber, as you know, nobody knows.
It is a real concern that there may not be any fans or few fans. Have you visualized how that'll impact the broadcast? How do you think it'll impact the players as well?
Well, in terms of the broadcast, we're figuring out what we want to do. I mean, there's some discussion amongst our production people. We're just getting underway with, what do you want to make it sound like? Do you want to pipe in noise, or do you want to have fans gathered all over and try to do a composite audio mix? So we're trying to figure this out. You will hear sound, because you don't want to hear, you don't want to see a football game and there's nothing, there's no response to anything. So we're still, and when I say we at NBC, and I'm sure the guys at Fox and CBS and ESPN are thinking about the same things right now as to how you want to do it. I hope it doesn't amount to that. I hope you can put some bodies in some seats. In terms of the players, I mean, they're conditioned to play, and I think it won't affect them that much, because for the most part, especially if you're the visiting team, you're trying to drown out the crowd. Is what you're trying to do. You're trying to make believe they don't exist, and now you won't have to make believe if they don't exist. And for the home team, they're going to go about their business, go about their appointed rounds like the postmen, and I don't think you'll see much of a difference. They'll miss the fans, but I think when it comes to playing the game and doing what they have to do, they'll have tunnel vision.
And the crowd being just one aspect of the home field advantage. Here in Vegas, the rule of thumb, although some would argue it's overhyped, is that home field is worth 3 points. I bring up sports betting because, gosh, what do you think about the perspective on sports betting now compared to, 10 years ago even?
You mean there's betting in Las Vegas?
Uh-huh.
I've heard. By the way, there's no game in the world I love better than craps. I love hockey, the Kings, and craps would be next. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because we've come from a point, as you know, Amber, where 10, 15 years ago, the NFL and the professional sports leagues were saying, no way, we don't want that. Too many bad things can happen. And then all of a sudden it kind of flipped on its head. And now you've got everybody embracing it, because they think there are ways they can make sure that it's still on the up and up. And there's a lot of money to be made. And so now the leagues are in partnership with it. So, it's going to be a little crazy, because it's one thing to bet on a game, or bet on an over under, or make a proposition bet. But if you start betting every play, is it going to be a run or a pass on first downs? I hope it doesn't get to that point, for a couple of reasons. Because number one, I think I love the purity of the game, and it's fun to bet and all of that. On the other hand, I don't want to see too many people having to join Gamblers Anonymous, because it's going to be so easy to bet on all sports and bet multiple ways. So it's kind of like, the COVID-19, what's going to happen? The gambling thing to me is the great unknown.
And do you think that there's any risk of there being any kind of, I don't know, players involved or in anything, the integrity of the game being at risk?
There's always the possibility, and there was the possibility even before this, but I think it's going to be laid out pretty strongly that, you have to keep an eye on everything these days. And the guys are going to know there are severe penalties. I mean, you look at what happened to Pete Rose. I mean, he went against the rules. He was retired by them, but he can't get another managing job, and he's not in the Hall of Fame because of this. So I think the penalties will be so severe that it won't be. You would hope it's not worth the while of somebody to try to influence the game in that manner. It's always a possibility, but hopefully it'll be a one-off and not something that's indigenous to the game itself.
And Pete Rose is a Las Vegas resident. Do you think that he should be allowed back into baseball or get into the Hall of Fame?
Well, as somebody who did the Cincinnati Reds in 1971, 2, and 3, and I was with the Big Red Machine announcing their games in those years, including the pennant-winning year of 72. And Rose, Bench, Morgan, Perez, Sparky Anderson, everybody's in the Hall of Fame except Pete. In terms of as a player, I mean, he should have been unanimously voted into the Hall of Fame. He broke a record that was impossible to break. I mean, Ty Cobb had 4,191 hits. Rose wound up with over 4,200. You think about that. You have to have 21 seasons of 200 hits to do that. And I have to tell you, Amber, in all the years I've covered sports, if you were to say to me, who's the one player that I enjoyed the most, that I loved the most to cover, it was Pete Rose. And why? Because I was with him every day for 3 years. And this guy, whether it was spring training in Bradenton, Florida, or the 7th game of the World Series, and I announced spring training games where Pete played, and I've announced the 7th game of the World Series where Pete played. He knew one speed, all out, 100%, all the time. And I learned a tremendous amount of baseball from Pete Rose. I used to, on the road trips, we'd leave the stadium, and I would try to sit next to him on the bus because I just wanted to go through the game with him. And he remembered every pitch, every circumstance. So I got a PhD from Pete Rose. I'd love to see him in the Hall of Fame.
So that's a yes. You think he should be in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I want to see him in the Hall of Fame. Look, he paid a huge price. He shouldn't have done what he did. He's kind of, I mean, he's had a hard time apologizing to the extent that I think a lot of the voters want him to. But what are you supposed to say at this point? If I had a vote, I'd put him in.
Let's get back to the games that you're going to be here for, the Raiders game. So you mentioned Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's October 25th. What do you make of that matchup?
Well, I think everybody wants to see how Brady is going to work with the Buccaneers, and he's got some great talent around him. 2 great wide receivers. Now he's got his boy Gronkowski back with him. The coach is a lot of fun, and he's a quarterback guru and Bruce Arians. So and Tom doesn't have anything to prove, but I think we all know that he's going to go down there and he wants to have a fantastic season. And I mean, he's to a place where nobody's been before. I mean, a starting quarterback, still a great quarterback at that age. So just to be able to watch Brady this year is going to be maybe the number one storyline in the National Football League. So by the time he gets to Vegas, we're going to know a lot more, because I think it's like week 7. So we're going to have a chance to see Tom, to see how he fits in, and who knows? It should be a heck of a night, though, one way or another.
Some would argue that what he does have to prove is that he can do well without Bill Belichick. Who do you think fares better this season? Bill without Tom or Tom without Bill?
I think they'll both fare very well. I think that, people say, well, who is more responsible for it? I mean, really, it's they cooked a great meal. They cooked a fantastic meal. For what was the best part of the meal? Was it the steak or the dessert or whatever? So to me, I'd always hear about, who's more responsible. I'm going, wait a minute, it's a great combo platter. It's a perfect combo platter. And they had 20 fantastic years. I can't imagine another pairing like that in the history of sports down the line. So I think they're both going to have success. Look, they've both proven that they are special. Tom has done it for 20 years on the field, and Belichick would certainly be in any conversation as the greatest coach of all time. So I see success for both of them coming up this year.
While we are on the topic of great coaches, the passing of Don Shula, will you share some of your memories of him?
I think he was as classy a man as I met in all the years that I've done the NFL. Had a chance to get to know Don very, very well. He was one of those guys, and what I think what you saw the other day when he passed, the respect and the love that his players expressed, every one of them. I watched those interviews, and that's something special. And there aren't a lot of coaches that would have that almost unanimous feeling amongst their players. I think of a man like John Wooden. He had the same great respect. When he passed away, the service for him with all of the players that played for him, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton and Keith Wilkes and the whole group of players, they loved him like a father. And I think the Dolphins felt pretty much the same way about Don. He was a special man. He was a very honest man, very upfront, very approachable, and a guy who lived a long and a pretty good life. You get to 90, that's you've run the table.
Quite an accomplishment, and still has that perfect record. Only team in the NFL.
Yes, he does. Oh yeah, gonna be tough to beat that too.
Yeah, especially with an extra game.
Right. Well, you have 2 extra games really. Now he's in his days the season was 14 games, and now it's look, he was 17-0, and the Patriots that year were 18-0 before the Giants took him down in that Super Bowl in Phoenix.
November 22nd is when the Raiders welcome the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. What do you make of that matchup?
Well, the Raiders,
Super Bowl champions. Sorry.
Right. The anytime you get those AFC West rivals facing each other, it's special. I mean, that's been a great division through the years with the Chargers and the Raiders. You put the Broncos in there, you throw the Chiefs in there, and I think of the AFC West very much like the NFC East, where in the NFC East you've got Washington and Philadelphia, Dallas and New York, and no matter what the matchup is, it's good, it's exciting. And I know, for us on primetime television, we love NFC East matchups because it just sings, no matter which combination you want to have. And it's pretty much the same way, I think, in that AFC West, especially, when the teams are good. Obviously, the Chargers weren't as good last year, neither were the Broncos, but here come the Raiders. The Chiefs, of course, are the champions. So I look at the NFC East and the AFC West as the 2 divisions where you get a matchup you can't go wrong in primetime television.
And ever since the draft, I've heard some analysts say that with the Raiders drafting so many wide receivers and their focus on the passing game, perhaps that's an attempt to match the Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City Chiefs offense, that they think that's the only way they can compete. What do you think of that strategy?
Well, I mean, you're trying to build a complete football team too, and Mike Mayock and John and the organization. I mean, it's one thing to obviously try to get great receivers, and they thought they had one last year until he decided he didn't want to play football very much longer. They thought they had the answer to that. Maybe they have another answer here, but it's not just Amber. It's not just one side of the ball. It's one of the ways you have to beat Mahomes is you got to stop him too. So you need a pretty good defense unless you want to get into a 51-48 game every week, and I don't think any coach wants to do that. So I look at the Raiders as a team they're gonna provide a lot of excitement, and they get in there against Kansas City. I mean, all those years of the Raiders against Kansas City, some terrific games, some very memorable games have taken place between those two teams, and this year should be no different.
Al, thank you so much for your time.
You bet, Amber. I'll see you hopefully in October.
I hope so too. Hope to get to meet you in person.